Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello, this is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thanks for being here with me today. I have a lovely guest, Emily Hay, with me this week, and we are talking about work-life integration. And if you know me at all, and you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you know how I feel about balance. I almost said, you know how I feel about bullshit. Well, I think that balance is bullshit. And I am so over this idea that we must find balance in all things. I think it's impossible, and I think it's setting us up for failure. And Emily, who is with me today, agrees with me. And we have a lovely conversation about an alternative. Because, it's one thing to say balance doesn't work. And it's another thing to come up with a solution for that, of how to live and work and be in this world in a way that feels good and that is productive and that hits all of the points that we need to hit in our life. And by points, I just mean like it satisfies all of our needs. We all have certain things that we need in order to feel our best. And I think that work-life integration is a really good alternative to what we've been taught before. Before we get to Emily's bio, I definitely want to tell you a little bit more about her before we jump into the interview. I want to remind you that my book of pocket permission slips, Give Yourself Permission, Pocket Permission Slips for Self-Care and Compassion, is out now on Amazon. And this is just a lovely, tiny little journal that you can use to write permission slips to yourself. This particular one in the series, There Will Be More, is all about self-care and compassion because it takes courage to take care of yourself. It takes courage to say, for example, I don't believe in balance. I give myself permission to not be balanced. That would be a great permission slip that you could write to yourself after listening to today's podcast. So if you or someone you know would really love to have a little tool to give themselves permission, you can check it out on Amazon. Just Google Kelly Covert, not Google, just in the Amazon search bar, you can write that in and it will come up. Or you can go to my website at kellycovert.com/books, and that has links to all of my journals and planners that you can use to help you live a life where you feel like you are good enough each and every day. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Emily. Emily A. Hay is the founder of Hey There Social Media. Her life's work is to empower moms to run their own social media marketing businesses so they too can live intentionally and work flexibly in what she has dubbed work-life integration nation. You're going to love her. I adore her. This interview is so great, and let's just get right to it. Here's Emily Hay. Emily Hay, welcome to In Her Voice. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Kelly. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm really good too. Actually, it's funny because this is a little bit earlier than I would normally record interviews. And so I had to do a couple stories on my Instagram to make sure my voice was working. And it is. So that's good. But I am so excited to have you here. And usually guests who are on my podcast are either people that I know that I've reached out to or people that have been pitched to me I'm connected with lots of wonderful people who know my podcast well and say, I have a great guest for you. But this interview came about in a really fun way when I posted about how balance is bullshit on my Instagram. And someone that knows you said, "Oh, you need to talk to Emily Hay." And so I reached out to you. And that's why I love Instagram. It's such a wonderful little place of like interesting connections. And today, what we're going to talk about is not balance, but what you call work-life integration. I love that so much.
Thank you, Kelly. What a lovely intro. And that's exactly how it happened. Yes, Kimberly is someone that went through our program, and we've really all just organically learned what work-life integration is. So it'll be a great chat today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're going to get to the work-life integration piece, but I think it's really important first to talk about work-life balance, as it were, which obviously I'm not a fan of. Tell me your thoughts about balance and particularly like how you think maybe we've been led astray.
Perfect. And I am so in your camp about balance just doesn't work, right? Like we've had posts on our own Instagram about F balance, right? It just
Right.
doesn't work. So, but it's funny though because I'll still use the hashtag work life balance because obviously it's a phrase, right,
Yep.
that people are very familiar with. But I have always looked at work life balance as setting us up to fail. And I'm a very visual person, and so I literally picture a woman on a tightrope with, her hand holding like crazy amounts of laptops and notebooks on one side, and then the other side there's children and dogs and maybe a yoga mat if she can fit that in. And there she is, barely holding it all together on this tightrope and not enjoying either side.
Mm-hmm.
And at any moment, she's going to come crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I've really been with work life balance from the very get go of the visual. It just sets you up to fail.
Yep. 100%. Like you're going to drop something or fall.
Yes. And if you drop something or fall, clearly you made the wrong choices. Clearly you have not balanced your life well enough and you do not have balance figured out.
That's exactly right. It's so frustrating. Well, and what do you think, like, where do you think this comes from in our society?
I look back at even the way I was raised. I mean, again, the term work life balance, I feel like has been around for a couple of decades. I can't say I did my historical homework on that. But my mom worked, and I remember the expectation of her handling everything with our personal family life, and
Mm-hmm.
that she had to be a perfect employee as well. And work life balance might have meant, clocking out at 5:01 in order to possibly make it to the soccer field by 5:30. But if something ran over, then if she missed a little bit of the soccer game, then clearly, that her life was out of balance that day. So I think it's something that society really conditions us to expect of women. I have to admit, I haven't really heard men held up to how's work-life balance going for you?
I agree.
Do
I
you?
agree. And I think a lot of it, I feel like it goes back to the times when it was unusual for a woman to work out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And as society has changed, there hasn't been a lot of room for changing those expectations of what like a woman is expected to do as a caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the expectation that we also work has been put upon us without sort of like any give in that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so fascinating is my mom worked too when I was growing up, and it was similar. She worked, and then she was responsible for like having dinner on the table every night when my dad got home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much of that she put on herself and how much of that he expected. I think it was probably a little bit of both, but I saw her get so frustrated and have so much resentment and yet never try to change the conversation or imagine that it could be different.
That's so true. And you talk about thinking of the expectation that was put upon her. Again, we've just reacted to that standard. And I remember even thinking, well, the either or. Like you either be a career woman in the suit, in the boardroom with daycare, or you stay home and there goes the visual of like 1950 with the apron on. Everything's in black and white.
Yeah, like are you successful if you're not earning a living with a quote unquote real job?
Yeah. And so to put the two together, if you want both, then you have to figure out work-life balance in order to have it all, whatever all means, right?
Do we want to have it all? That's
Do
the
we
real
want
question.
to?
Well, and you know what comes up for me too is what I find interesting with the women that I work with who I think to the T would label themselves first as moms and second as businesswomen.
Mhm.
That idea of work-life balance can swing both ways, right? So I see a lot of women who like are struggling because they have these full-time jobs and how do they fit time in for their family? And then there's another side to that coin, and that is women who have full-time family, if you will. We all have full-time family, but you know, they see that as their full-time job and they're wanting to have something of their own, but they're having a really hard time giving that time to themselves because they feel like, well, I'm not doing a good job at being a mom if I take this time. And I think that's just like a really interesting thing that I haven't seen very many people talk about at all, that I see a lot of moms who are entrepreneurs particularly struggle with. Like they start a business and then they have a hard time keeping it going because everything else is a priority over their own business.
Well, you're right. And Kelly, you know, I've read a lot of your posts and I know you dive deeply into perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something too of, well, if I'm going down the mom track, then I'm going to do it wholly and perfectly. And if I want to be, you know, the businesswoman, then I have to do that wholly and perfectly. So maybe our subconscious kind of tells us, well, just pick one, because doing both perfectly is going to be insane because, you know, then you have to figure out work-life balance. And as soon as it gets hard, back to the blame, like
Yep.
you failed, you made the wrong choices. So again, I think some of the reason why I embrace integration so much is because it was that perspective change, that permission that said, no, just doing the two together, mom and professional at all times, is doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
Not, you know, one or the other and perfectly, whatever that standard is.
Well, and I think you're exactly right. I think that perfectionism comes in, and so many people are unwilling to even attempt to imagine what it would look like if they did things imperfectly, even though we're all doing things imperfectly all the time. But it's about finding satisfaction in that imperfection instead of finding fault in the imperfection, don't you think?
It's exactly that. I often say it's about fulfillment, not the overwhelm, right? And I've even talked to gals who will say, well, if I'm integrating it all, then I must be able to do it all. And it's like, no, you have to back up, back to the whole clearing of the deck, shrinking down the deck, feeling fulfillment, not overwhelm. Like that is a big red flag if you're feeling like, yeah, you're completely overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, I'm a Gemini, and so I want to do all of the things.
Okay.
You know, I'm passionate about many things, and so many people have said, well, why don't you just pick one? And I'm like, but I don't want to pick one. And so I've really had to lean into this idea of that when I'm doing any one thing. For example, right now I'm with you and I'm wholly and completely with you. 100% of me is here with you. And when I'm done with this, I'll go check on my kids, and they're older, so they're more independent. So I don't have to, you know, have my eyes on them every second of the day. But when I'm done here with this interview, I'll go check in with my kids this morning, and I'll be 100% wholly with them. And that feels beautiful and not always easy, but right. And so let's get into this idea of work-life integration. Talk to me about what that means to you.
Sure. And even the explanation you just gave about being present, that also is such a fault with balance, right? That you think, well, I have to constantly be anticipating the next ball that could potentially drop, and therefore you're never present.
That's
you're
exactly
always
right.
thinking what's next because I need to get ahead of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with, I guess with work life integration, like I said, I look at it as being fulfilled and being intentional. And I am not really a woo woo fluffy person. I'm a very logical, analytical type mind. So it's at first when I thought of those words, I thought, is that too vague and fluffy? But no, when I think of intentional, that to me is the component of making the decisions of what you actually want to be focused on.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if that is the life component of yourself, that's what have you made time for yourself to do that day. If it's the work side, intentionally choosing this is where I want to spend my time, and I'm not going to look back or feel guilty that I'm pursuing this path. And then the fulfillment side, that's where I guess I look at having a more inclusive definition of work. And what I mean by that is, just because you aren't paid for something doesn't mean that you can't be fulfilled from it. And so a lot of gals, they think, well, if I want to pursue a side hustle, or I think I have this idea, or I'd like to do some work on the side, if it's not 0 to 60, like full-time income right away, then it must not count as work. Or, exploring some side passions that could potentially be something you make a business around. You might say to yourself, well, if I'm not making income from that, then that's not work. So I look at, again, a more inclusive definition of work, because then you're fulfilling yourself. You really are thinking of things outside of the day-to-day caregiving and the mom life that we all, not we all, that we choose to put our time and energy into. So if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, I like that. And let's dig in. And I will say I am woo-woo and fluffy. And I love it when I have more sort of logic-based guests on here, because I think sometimes people will roll their eyes at me and say, "Oh, Kelly, well, that's really nice, but I think that we can approach this from lots of different perspectives." And I want to start first with this idea of fulfillment. And one of the things that you said was this idea of it doesn't count if we're not making money, or not making a full-time earning, or not spending all our time on that. And I am fascinated with my own, and I've become aware of this. Would I say obsession? I don't think it's obsession, but just this awareness of that. I feel like my time must count and things must count. And I see so many people doing this with lots of things, like with work, with exercise, like if you don't let someone know about it, does it count? If you just do something for yourself, does it count? And I'm interested to see what you think about this. Where do you think this feeling of like having things count comes from?
Gosh, I mean, to unpack some of that, you think about back to the perfectionist side, right? That I think a lot of times, okay, let's look at this through the lens of a woman who wants to possibly pursue a side business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something for herself that she either has a passion around or that she has skills for, and she wants to do more of, but doesn't know how to do it in a paid capacity like tomorrow.
Right.
So I think some of that is just you have to be brave enough to get started on something. And I think that's where you start to get scared of, well, I don't really know how to get to my end goal, so I'm just too scared to even get started.
Yes.
And then if you think, well, some measure of me being successful would be if I can get to a goal of being paid for doing something. So that's where maybe some gals would say, I'd like to get back into, they think they might get back into a corporate environment or in some sort of, very defined work type role. So I don't know. Think through that with me.
Well, and I think it's the word that really stuck out to me in what you said was this idea of measure, like that we have to measure ourselves against a standard or against other people who are already in that field. And we have to sort of rank ourselves like, okay, where do I stand in this comparison? And this is true, by the way, not only in work, but in motherhood. I mean, think of like Pinterest.
Huh.
Right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, oh, look at this cake I made. Look at the crafts that we did. Look at my beautiful gardens. And I have worked really hard in my own life to understand that the only person that I'm measuring against is myself. Like I turn inward to my inner voice to understand where I am. And that's not something that I have to find outwardly, although it is easy to lean into that. And so I think that that's kind of the same thing as making things count. It's like we have to measure up. We have to say, this is where we are. And I feel like a better way of doing that is turning inward and asking our inner voice, okay, where am I? And whenever I ask that question, my inner voice says, you're right where you need to be. And, then I can ask the next question, where do I go next?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get into this idea of intention, right? So how do you go about making these decisions? Like, how do you prioritize in your own life? And how do you teach the women that are in your course to be intentional about their choices?
Mm-hmm. Sure. One of the things, so one of the women on my team, Deanna Rose, we've worked together since 2010. She was a former journalist. And so she brought up the analogy of living, work-life integrators. We live our days like an inverted pyramid with putting the most important things at the top. I bring up the journalism background because she said that that's how you'd write a story. You put the most important meat at the top. So if your editor got to it, and down towards the bottom, if they got editing happy and started slashing details, it was usually towards the end, and you could feel good about the fact that everything you wanted, it was up front in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So with our days, I mean, that's one of the ways that I look at work-life integration, is giving me a framework to judge my days. Again, not to necessarily judge to the point of measurement, but to judge in the sense of fulfilled and intentional. And even if that's, having one or two things at the top of your inverted pyramid that you want to get done that day, I always find that I'm a much happier person. I'm a better mom. I'm a kinder wife when I got through those things earlier in the day. And so I think I just naturally bring that mindset and almost that approach to the women that go through our training program, because we pride ourselves on the work system that we've been using for 10 years as a self-employed, social media marketing team. So that's something too that just to help them reframe how they're going to approach their newfound work self, right? That now they've got these skills and they've got these abilities to be able to deliver social media marketing for clients. And it's not just about knowing the latest and greatest on Instagram. You need to know how to manage your day in a way that continues to make you feel like you do have this and that you didn't go down any sort of balance path.
That's right. And I love what you say about you sort of look at the priorities, look at the things that you want to accomplish, and you pick one or two, those most important. What's your process like for doing that? I'm really curious about process and practice. How do you decide? Because I think most women have a to-do list that's like 3 pages long. And there's clean the house, and that's right next to, send an email out to my email list, which is also very important for a business. So how do you determine the most important for yourself?
Sure. And this whole last year has been the craziest exercise of trying to maintain focus, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, like just the ping-ponging, the mental ping-pong, the mental strain, the bandwidth has been exceeded. So I would say, and this is something, I still have been able to follow during the pandemic, but it's just been such a challenge. Thinking through what needs done that yields you the most result. So if you have that 1 hour, is it best for you to spend that hour formatting that email? Or is it best for you to spend that hour getting the email out and going and making 3 more LinkedIn connections with people? So I guess I constantly say to myself, even though there are things that I want to do, in that 1 free hour, there might be something I know I want to do during that time. And that could be, not to deprive yourself of those side projects that you just get sucked into and enjoy doing, but just stopping and saying, what do I need to get done during this hour that is going to make me feel like I got something major off my list? Not just, okay, great, I've wasted the hour and I still have these 5 important things to get through. Or at the end of the day, what can I get done that will yield me, as I said, the greater result? What will, continue to propel me forward and not just handle something in the moment? Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does make so
Okay.
much sense. And I have to say, one thing that I have discovered during the pandemic is the beauty of working in what I call sprints. So I have worked from home for a really long time, except when I have concerts and rehearsals. That's not working from home, but everything else I do is from home.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes, my business, my coaching business. It also includes the work that I do for the symphony that I'm in, and also includes taking care of my family, right? It's all in the same spot. And what's been super helpful for me, because you said, what are you going to do with that hour? I consistently give myself 90-minute blocks. And on some days, I might have only one 90-minute block. And on some days, I might have three 90-minute blocks. But I intentionally choose the task that I'm going to work on during that 90-minute block. And that is all that I do. And that has really helped me a lot with focus, because I think that, you can create the list, you can choose your top 2 things or your top 3 things, but you still have to have the focus to do it, right? To sit down
Mm-hmm.
and do it. And knowing that I have 90 minutes and then boom, I'm done and I can, I'll be on to something else. That really helps me stay present and focus and pour everything that I have into that one priority that I set for myself. So I find that also to be really useful, like couple the idea of working in chunks of time instead of just saying, "Oh, I have the whole day open. What shall I do?"
Sure. It's funny, Kelly, because that philosophy worked for us up until the pandemic. And I say us because it was, remember my entire team and I were all moms. We've all worked from home for a long time, like yourself. And when March 2020, not to make this a pandemic conversation, but when it came down, we thought we've got this. Like we
Yeah.
know what we're doing. Our people need us. Like the people that we know, our people need us most now. And then we were like, what the heck is this? Because we also perfected working in sprints, being productive in bursts. But as we all know, just we aren't meant to sprint for a year plus. We
It's
aren't meant
true.
to balance the stress, the anxiety, and I'm only mentioning that because as you were talking through the beautiful scenario of productive bursts, I kind of sink a little bit because I'm like, I haven't been feeling that productive this, last year, not the last week or so. No, because the mental strain has just
Yes.
been crazy. So I only bring that up because again, we are among our people with just having so many demands and responsibilities. And I actually, I started beating myself up. Like clearly, you aren't doing the systems that work. You've got to change things, Emily. And then it was just we've been dealt a massive wild card, right? Like that, no one was.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well,
just
and
to
I
bring that up.
think what you're hitting on is part of work-life integration is flexibility,
Uh huh.
right? I mean, how have you discovered how flexible you are this year?
Well, yes. I mean, oh gosh, so many. Like the anxiety just starts creeping up thinking about this year. But again, with work life integration, we used to think about sick days, sunny days, snow days. Like you could always handle something that came your way because you had your systems in place and anything that was served to you was temporary and flexibility accommodated that beautifully. It's just, again, I know, again, we've been through this. Everyone's been through something that no one ever expected. And I just remember, honestly, Kelly, there were professional development sessions and Facebook posts and things out there during this last year that normally would have filled my bucket, but actually it gave me FOMO. I would look at
Mm,
all of the amazing work that people are out there doing on their businesses and I'd be like, why am I not farther and faster? Oh, it's because I'm dealing with this whole pandemic thing. And the last thing I wanted to do was sound like a resentful mama. right? I don't
Right.
resent my children,
Right.
excuse me, my children, but it's just, we just were dealt, like I said, this whole wild card.
Right. Well, and I think this really speaks to this idea of being where you are.
Okay.
Like it forces us to be present, right? This past year, the pandemic year, has forced us to really take account of what it means to rest, of what it means to work, in such a weird way, of what it means to love ourselves. And I really, for me, it's been a struggle and a gift because
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it's helped me to recognize what's really, really important. And I think that the flexibility is a huge part of that. I mean, my listeners know that I love journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really how I connect with my inner voice. That is my practice. And I've noticed that there's been an ebb and a flow to my journaling, which in the past, if I, hadn't been journaling for a few days or a few weeks, I would feel guilty about that. There would be a lot of guilt and a lot of like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing this thing that I know that I love? And now I'm just recognizing that if I am filling that up with something else that also fuels me and connects me with my inner voice, that's okay. Like it doesn't have to look only one way. And if we can tell, like if there can be a takeaway for everyone on this episode, I think it's that like work-life integration is going to look different for you. It's going to look different for me. It is individual. Only you can decide what that's going to look like and what that's going to feel like. And the way to really understand that is to go inward, not to look outward. Don't you think?
I think that's a beautiful way to summarize, because with work-life balance, it's almost like the same bar that we're all measured against. But with
Right.
work-life integration, you hit on a key point. I literally posted about this in our Work-Life Integration Nation Facebook group about, I am a person who tends to get wrapped up into the right way. What is the right way to get something done? And the only reason why I say the right way is because I usually judge that from a sense of time. Right
Mm-hmm.
way equals quickest, equals best, all in one, i.e., no regrets later. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't waste time or dabble or didn't do it wrong, which again is a silly measure. But I've had conversations with people that talk about things like, there are more than one ways to get something done. And as simple as that sounds, Kelly, I really struggled with that. And so to your point about looking inward, run your own race.
Yeah.
Whatever it looks like to you that day, that month, that year, that is, you're the only person that you need to judge yourself against, and not hold up some arbitrary standard that at the end of the day leaves you feeling defeated
That's
and like I
right.
might as well give up before I even start.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think we have to be, in order to be at the place where we are fully embracing that idea, there has to be a lot of honesty because and I'll just speak from my personal experience. There have been times where I say to myself, I'm this is where I need to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really believe it.
Okay.
And I'm not really being honest with myself, So there are times when I'll go back to the journaling example, right? Where I'm not journaling every day, but I'm also not replacing that with anything else that's filling me up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like crap. And I'm like, oh, but if I'm not honest with myself about, oh, you need to get back to your practice of journaling, then I'm not doing myself any favors. So yes, it is possible to measure our own place, if you will, but
Mm-hmm.
but it requires honesty with yourself. And sometimes that can be tricky too. I mean, we all go through periods where we just are in denial. Like we don't want to admit that we, need to actually show up on social media, or we actually need to sit our butt in the chair and figure out our finances. And it requires honesty as well.
That's so true. And I think, going back to grace, right? We've heard this whole year, give yourself grace. I couldn't really translate that very well. I couldn't apply it to myself. I mean, I guess I looked at it as just give yourself the permission to be okay with the unfinished to-do list. Like that, I hear that, but it wasn't the best translation for me. And maybe where I pull in with, giving yourself grace. I have this sticky note. It's from a friend mentor, Amy Jo Martin. It's a sticky note on my desk that says intention is greater than pace. And that has helped me when I start to feel the physical signs of burnout, the mental fatigue, just the inner voice starting to say, come on, Emily, like you can do this. Just keep going, keep plowing through. And then it's like, intention is greater than pace. I will get there. So that to me has been how I've kind of translated the whole give yourself grace. The grace that I'm trying to give myself is just realizing that you're going at the most realistic pace for you, and rushing it isn't going to get you there faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, you're exactly right. Because if you do rush it, then you're not where you need to be.
Yeah.
I love the concept of grace, and I love this idea of intention coupled with that. Grace plus intention to me is inspired action. We can see, oh, I'm not perfect, and that's okay, right? That's the grace. And then intention, and what is next for me, and what is the very next step, and how do I do that? And then those two together I find are very powerful. And I just love that. It's not about pace. It's about intention. There's no finish line.
Right. So hard to keep in mind.
Yeah, exactly right. I just posted about that the other day too. We're like digging into like what's happening. And that's what I love about these conversations, because both of us, I think, would freely admit we don't have this all figured out. Mm-hmm. But the intention is, this is how I want to live my life. This is what I desire. And this is how I know life can feel good. Because that's what I want for everyone. I want their lives to feel good to them.
Yeah. And, you talk about feeling good. One of the habits I think all of us women tend to, I don't know if we're conditioned to, the apologizing. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it wrong. I'm not available when you need, the apologizing. I think work-life integration has also given me that sense of, I don't need to apologize because I'm integrating. And an example would be, I'll be texting with one of the gals on our team about scheduling a call, and the logical next reply would be like, sorry, I can't do that time. But the response is really, how about this time instead of that time? And we say, no worries, like it's integration, right? Don't feel like you have to apologize that you can't make something happen because you're integrating.
Yeah, I love that so much. So your company is a social media company, correct?
Yeah. Yes, we are.
Mm-hmm. But then you have like another arm of that, if you will, where you're teaching women how to start their own social media companies. And that's where this idea of work-life integration came in.
It did. It was, you want to talk about inner voice, Kelly? Again, that's where your message has been so powerful to me, because you just kind of go through things until you realize, wow, there's more to it than just, oh, well, then we decided to pivot. It's not that simple. There was an inner voice. I probably didn't acknowledge it as that. And when I thought about, even for this podcast, to talk with you about the clearest time that I've had recently of even the inner voice speaking and listening, was this pivot. And I say pivot because that's been such a pandemic word, but it was more like a natural progression for us. Mm-hmm. And so I'm talking about the fall of 2019, when, we are a boutique social media marketing agency, right? Small to medium businesses, they outsource their social media marketing to us. Pretty straightforward. And we've been doing that since 2010, but it was the fall of 2019 that my children at that point were 3 and 5, just a little outside of baby phase, enough to go, oh, okay, I can kind of see the light. What's next? And that's when my team and I, we kind of all looked at each other and we're like, this is more than just a work from home gig. This is the whole lifestyle. We happen to use social media marketing as our way to work for ourselves, have flexibility, call our own shots, feel fulfillment, and we can go help other women do the same. Mm-hmm. And so that was really, like I said, the I guess it is a pivot, but the progression where at the end of 2019 that we decided to launch the beginning of 2020, still doing what we do for businesses, but now saying to other women, we'll show you how to do that too.
You know what I love about this so much is that I think that sometimes women are scared of competition. And here you are training people to do exactly what you do. And that to me is so exciting and so empowering. You're saying there is so much work for all of us. If you are interested in this, please come. And in doing that, you're also teaching people about this wonderful lesson of like you can have a life that feels really good to you, that is fulfilling and intentional and joyful, and allows you the time to do all the things.
Well, Kelly, thank you for explaining it that way, because it's funny. I will not give myself more credit than is deserved. It took 9 years to get to that point because I also had that, I've got to go find the next client. I've got to go get the next piece of business, and almost had like literally my arms closed, right? Like my arms are wrapped around my chest. Like it's mine. It's mine. I got to go hunt for it. And I hang on to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was that moment of like, now let's open our arms because
Yeah.
there's enough for everybody.
Yes.
But it didn't take, I didn't have that realization the first month, year, 5 years of business. And it's not even just a matter of confidence and experience to then not feel threatened. It's wisdom. Like it took wisdom and
Yeah.
and you can't manufacture wisdom. You just need some time.
Yeah.
So as much as, you know, the story, I like to think it's a lovely story. It's a natural progression that makes sense. It absolutely had timing behind it, and I wasn't in control of that timing. I just felt like that inner voice, you know, at that moment said, yes, this is the next thing. And otherwise I would have looked at it exactly like some people would have, saying, so now you're training your competitors. No. It's what you were wise enough to see, Kelly. There's enough for everybody. And at the end of the day, I am more lit up to give women one way to do what we've done than anything else.
I love it. I love it, Emily.
You're so sweet.
Speaking of your inner voice, what is your inner voice saying to you these days?
Some of that, the inner voice right now is, again, it's still dialed down into the pandemic life, right? Of just keep going. You're doing it right. I shouldn't even say, you know, you're doing it right. You're doing it the right way for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as I stop listening to that inner voice, that's when I get nervous of maybe I'm not going fast enough,
Yeah.
right? Come on, intention is greater than pace. I just got done saying that, but I will ignore the inner voice and I'll say, hurry up, you know, you can do this faster, grind out a little more work. And then that's not good. And then, so like I said, the inner voice is telling me right now, just keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. Your inner voice is so wise and she knows exactly what you need. And I believe that that is true for all of us. So Emily, if people want to connect with you online and learn more about your company and what you do, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, thank you, Kelly. I'm on Instagram at Emily A. Hay, and our business is Hey There Social Media, so HAY. You can find us right through Instagram.
Mm-hmm. And I'll put links to all of your social media and website and everything like that, so people can access it right through whatever podcast app that you're listening to this episode to. So Emily, thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for this really great conversation about work-life integration. It's something I think about a lot, and I love to have these words now to put on it, because for a while it was just all from like, well, I don't believe in balance. So this feels really good. And I thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Honestly, I'm so grateful for the opportunity. It's always exciting to talk with someone else that can also wrap their head around, you know, the integration concept, but it's inclusive, right? Mm-hmm. This is not like you must do social media or you must work for yourself or you must. No, like we are all work-life integrators. It's just a matter of changing your perspective.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, thanks, Emily. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Kelly. You do the same.
I don't know if you can tell this from the interviews and episodes I've been putting out lately, but I'm really in this place of thinking about how I can get super clear on my own needs so I can take care of myself. And this conversation is really pinpointing for all of us what happens when we start to do that. When we start to give ourselves grace, when we start to get clarity around what it is we really want. And this also means how we define success and what we spend our money on and what we spend our time on. If we are very clear about what we need and what we want, that I think is the basis of true self-compassion. And I think all of that, like Emily said, coupled with grace, can do so much. It can do so much. And I really hope that you're able to take in what Emily shared here and what we talked about today and apply that. This podcast is more than entertainment. Of course, I want you to enjoy yourself when you're listening to it, and I want you to listen. But what I want even more than that is I want you to take away what you've learned and apply it to your life so that you can feel better, so that you can live a life that is meaningful to you. Because when we are doing that as women, as humans, as people, I really believe that's when we can put out into the world what we were born to put out into the world. That's when we can access that. And it takes courage. And it takes giving ourselves permission, like I talked about at the beginning of the episode when I was talking about the pocket permission slips. You know, it's not for the faint of heart, but I don't think you would be listening to this if you were faint of heart. Remember this each and every day, no matter what you have done or what you have not done, no matter the size of your bank account or the size of your pants, each and every day, you are worthy.